no, e non abbiamo parlato per niente.
Perfetto, allora cominciamo la registrazione, la conferenza. Good evening everyone and thank you to be here. And this evening we have our guest who is Riccardo Migliavada that is finishing his PhD at our university. Please, Riccardo, I give you the floor and you can introduce you well, not meglio di me. Thank you.
Thank you, Antonella. Good evening, everybody. As Antonella said, I'm actually at my last year in Pollenzo as a PhD student. I have a bachelor in gastronomic science in Pollenzo. I was one of the first students of the university in 2007. And after my bachelor, I started to work in gastronomic sector, first as a buyer and then in the restaurant sector as a restaurant manager and shop manager. And after 4 years working in this sector, I work as a consultant for restaurant owner and for companies. At that time was 2014, and I decided to quit my job and go back to study. And actually, I was not really interested in food anymore, or better, I wanted to have a break with my job in the food world. So I decided to study neuroscience, because I was really interested in brain and how brain works. But actually, during my degree in neuroscience in Milan, in the University of Milan, I get closer again with food, and I wrote my thesis on how food can affect our brain, because food can really have a deep impact on our health and on our brain. So, and today I want to talk with you about this topic. So I want to share with you the slide. I don't really like the web presentation, but unfortunately it's the only way we have right now. We cannot be in our beloved Aula Magna. So I will try to adapt to this format. I hope you can see the slide right now. Can
yes,
anyone?
yes,
Okay,
we
perfect.
can see that.
Thank you, Antonella. So I want to start from this quote. Savarin, Jean-Anthelme Brillat-Savarin, that most of you or everybody should know, who was together with Grimaud de la Reynière, one of the father of the modern concept of gastronomy. The concept of gastronomy that our university tried to carry on. And I always loved this quote. It gave me a lot of insight and inspiration during the years. And today we will try to analyze together, or basically I will try to analyze with you this quote. Unfortunately, the interaction is not really easy to have right now, but I will try to do my best. And if you want to say something, just please raise your hands or just interrupt me whenever you want. Just write or whatever. So what these quotes say: animals feed themselves, and men eat, but only wise men know the art of eating. So there are two important concepts. First of all, the difference between feeding and eating behavior. That this is something really interesting and not so easy actually to define and to understand. And the other aspect is the only wise man know the art of eating. Today, we'll try to understand this second part, and even more, because we will see that wise men, they are not only wise, that not only know the art of eating, but they actually are wise because they know what and how to eat. That is really, really important. But before we need to give a look to our history, our evolutionary history, and the evolution of our diet. Actually, we start evolution eating really few kind of food. We didn't have all the food variety that we have today, of course. And the point is that the diet is really a driving force of our evolution, of human evolution, because along with the increasing of food diversity that we reached during our evolution, we increase the quantity of nutrients, the available nutrients, and energy, and so we can see a direct increase of our brain size, our brain volume. So there is a direct relation between our diet and the increase of our brain and the functional evolution of our brain. But it's not only a matter of variety, it's also a matter of processing, how we process the food. Indeed, okay, we can say we are human because we cook. This is called the cooking hypothesis. There's a beautiful book explaining this hypothesis, is Catching Fire by Brianza, how cooking made us human. Why is so important? So the cooking is so important because with fire, with cooking, we started to process food, and much more energy coming from food become available, and also, and this energy rise even more the size of our brain. But not only we had more energy available, and that means also we have more time saving, because we didn't have to spend the whole day eating or looking for food, but we had the possibility to stock food, to cook food, to have more energy available, and also more food security. So we have to remember that during our evolution, we developed most of our behavior and our biology in the time where we were hunter and gatherers. So in a time where there was few availability of food, and we need to look for food for most of our time. And this was the main activity of our ancestor, and so our biology developed according to this situation. So why we eat? It sounds like actually a simple question, but it's not really so simple, because even from a biological point of view, eating is much more than just the repletion of calories due to energy expenditure. So it's not just a matter of energy, but it's far more complex. Indeed, when talk about eating, when we talk about food consumption, about feeding, we always all these definitions get blurry, but it's really important to understand all the difference between eating and feeding, because there are two different behavior. Talking about eating, talking about food consumption, we can distinguish two main aspects, two main factors: the external factors and the internal factors that regulate food intake. So let's start from the internal factors that regulate food intake. So from a physiological point of view, there are three main aspects that regulate food intake: the homeostasis, the hedonic hunger, and cognition. If we talk about feeding, feeding is just a matter of homeostatic control. So we have energy, we need to store energy in our body, and to use energy when we need it for all our cellular metabolism. But it's not just a matter of feeding. As we said before, we are humans because we eat, and eating concerns also the reward and the limbic system and the top-down process, that means attention and memory. What's homeostasis? What's the homeostatic control of food intake? We have to think that live cells constantly oxidize metabolic fuel, the energy, the food, to carry on all the cellular processes. So they need a constant supply of calories and oxygen. But while oxygen is constantly available, instantaneously available through the respiratory system and blood flow, for nutrients, and it takes time to be processed from our stomach, from the time we eat, to arrive to our inside the cells. So animals developed the capability to store energy also outside the cell, throughout all the body. And a consequence of this functional organization is the capability of the human body, of the animal body, to alternate to different moments, to different phase of food intake. That is food intake and post-ingestive intake. So the homeostasis is the complex system that directs nutrients into storage pools, that we store nutrients when they are in excess while we are eating, and they regulate mobilization of nutrients from these pools, from this reserve, when they are needed, when the cells need energy. So caloric homeostasis is the continuous alternation of these two metabolic states, the prandial and the postprandial state. And these are respectively characterized by food intake, so the prandial, and store energy consumption, the postprandial. And all these mechanisms, all this balance between these two states is regulated by physical and chemical signals. From two types, basically: short-term signal, that is represented by gastric distension, and longer-term signals that are represented by peptide hormones. But first, long-term signals, so gastric distension, what is it? Is the phenomenon that happens while we are eating. While we are eating, the food we ingest goes to our stomachs start to stretch and to produce a gastrointestinal hormone that is called cholecystokinin, that goes up to our brain and tell our brain that we are eating and we have eaten enough. But it's only according to the size of what we are eating, to the weight of what we are eating, and this is not related with calories. And this short-term signal, because it just tell what we are eating in the moment during the lunch, for example, but it doesn't inform our brain to the overall status, energetic status of our body. While the long-term signal that are represented by peptide hormones such as leptin and ghrelin, that those are called adiposity signal, inform our brain to the status of fat contained in our body. So the fat, it means energy that we have stored in our body. So ghrelin is called also the hunger hormone, while leptin is the satiety hormone, because they have the opposite effect on our hypothalamus. This is the side of the brain, especially the arcuate nucleus of hypothalamus. This is where our brain processes all this information regarding the food and the satiety that inform our brain about the level of energy we have stored or we have consumed. But it's not only about the hemostatic control of food intake. This is the difference between feeding and eating. Because in eating, we do not eat only because we are hungry, but we eat also just because of the pleasure that food gave us. And the pleasure is related with the reward system that is in our brain, that is the limbic system of our brain. That is basically this mechanism that give us a reward, a pleasure when we eat food, and tell us that we need to eat and to store food as much as we can. And because when we were hunter-gatherers, we lived in a world of food scarcity, and not in a world of food abundant as we live in today. So we had this mechanism that help us to seek for food and store food as much as we can. And then we have the cognitive control of food intake. This is really, really important. The cognitive control, it means it involves the prefrontal cortex of the brain that is responsible for the higher cognitive capability of our brain. That's what we call basically thinking. This is responsible for inhibition, the inhibition of food intake. It is the counterbalance of the reward system. What is important in the cognitive control of food intake? Memory, attention. There are two fundamental aspects of the cognitive control. Without attention, without being attentive, we do not realize how much food we are eating. And attention is directly related with the perception of satiety hours after the eating episodes. If for example, we are not paying attention, and for example, we are watching TV while we are eating, we can even eat the double of food we normally eat, and we do not remember. So after a few hours, we will perceive the feeling of satiety. We will not perceive the feeling of satiety, and we will become hungry, even if we eaten the double amount of food that we normally eat, because we didn't pay attention. So the other aspect is memory. Without memory, we cannot remember. If we do not remember, we we do not know how much food we have eaten. There is a really interesting case, for example, with patients suffering of Alzheimer, or there is an historical case that this patient HM, this is one of the most studied patients in the history of psychology. HM suffer from epilepsy, and so his doctor decided to take it away the locus of epilepsy in his brain, that was the hippocampus. So they surgically removed the hippocampus in both sides of the in the brain, so in the both hemisphere, right and left hemisphere in the brain. But actually, hippocampus is fundamental. It's a fundamental place to develop new memory. So when after the operation, he woke up, the doctors realized he was not able to create new memory anymore. And so they did, among many thousands of experiments they did with him, because he was not able to remember any of them, they made also this one about food and the perception of satiety. Basically, they gave him five times, after another, the same lunch, but without having the capability of develop new memories. I was not able to perceive the need for eating, neither the feeling of satiety. So after 5 different meals, one after another, it was ready to eat the 6th one. At that time, I don't know, at the 6th time, the doctor decided to stop, of course, because all was quite dangerous. But this explains how memory are really, really important for the perception of satiety. But not only memory are important for the perception of satiety, because they are important for the consumption of food in general. For example, just eat with pills. They show that it's not a solution. They studied during the 70s the possibility to give just pills to astronauts for their feeding, but they realized that this was not possible because of many different aspects that we just saw. For example, eating only with pills give not rise to gastric distension, so give not rise to the perceiving of satiety given by gastric distension. Plus, another important aspect is chewing. Through chewing, we communicate to our brain that we are eating, and this helps the perceiving of satiety. But this does not happen when we eat just with pills. And then we do not perceive their words. We don't enjoy food if it's just a pill. It's not just a matter of nutrient, but it's also a matter of pleasure. It's a matter of quantity. It's a matter of visual perception, because indeed it really influence a lot how much we like it, how much we like the food, and how much we perceive the food in terms of satiety hours after the eating episode. For example, they made this experiment where they gave a bowl with a soup to a subject, to 20 different subjects actually. To some of them, they told them the bowl was full of 500 milliliters of soup, and to others they told them that the bowl was 300 milliliters of soup. So to the people that receive the bowl with 500 milliliters, that was actually 500 milliliters, and to which they say there was 500 milliliter, the perception of satiety was totally different in respect with people that receive 300 milliliter, even if it was instead 500 milliliter actually in the soup, in the bowl. So it's not just a matter of the quantity, but it's also a matter of the perception, and also a matter of the description. If I'm telling you that it's 500 milliliter, you will feel more, you will perceive more the satiety hours after the eating episode. Even if you are eating the same, but what I'm telling you, what you perceive from a visual point of view, it's really important. I'm sorry that the slide became a mess. I don't know why, but it's not only a matter of physiology, there's also psychological aspect regarding food intake. Eating, it's really complex. It's diverse, multi-level, dynamic, contextual, multifaceted, and integrated activity. That means eating regards psychology, socio-cultural factors, biology, physical factors, and it's dynamic because it changes over time during our life, but also during the day. It's because it's situated within specific condition and setting where we live in the environment. It is multifaceted because concern what, where, for how long, with who, why, and when the eating episode occur. It's integrated because can be concern individuals, concern communities, families, and is diverse because people have distinct and unique eating activities. All of us have different eating habits and show different eating patterns. So other than the internal factors, there are many important external factors involved in food consumption. There are habits, as I just said. There is food visibility. There are social norms. For example, the fact that we eat for breakfast or during lunch and during dinner time, and not just randomly during the day. There are also the fact that eating is a social activity, so maybe we eat a sandwich with a friend just because of the company, not because we are really angry, and many different other aspects, but most of all, there is availability. The environment where we live and the availability of food are really, really important in terms of food consumption. Indeed, as we said before, we evolved in a situation, in an environment of food scarcity, while today we live in an environment of food abundance that is what is called today an obesogenic environment, an environment that where food is everywhere, whenever we want, whichever kind of food we want is always available. And this is really dangerous because all our biology is made for another kind of environment. Because as we say, 95% of our biology developed when we were hunters and gatherers, when food were not available. So what happened in this kind of environment with our brain? We are not actually made for this environment, and this environment is detrimental for our health and for our brain in particular, because we eat too much. It's not only a matter of which kind of food, but also the quantity of food and the texture of food. There are three main aspects that really affect our brain and our cognitive capabilities. But for example, the Western diet, a diet rich in saturated fatty acid, is associated with a smaller hippocampus, that is this area of the brain, as we said before, in the case of HM, responsible for the creation of new memories. So it's really important for memories and for intelligence in general, and also for mood. As eating, on the other hand, is associated with a larger hippocampal volume, so it helps the creation of new memory and improve mood. So feeding and eating, as we say, animal feed themselves, man eat. So we saw the difference between feeding, really shortly actually, but we saw the difference between feeding and eating. This is not just a matter of replace the consumed energy. It's not a matter of nutrients, but also involves memory, attention. It involves the reward system, that means pleasure. But as we say now, eating affect also our cognitive abilities, and in particular with our brain plasticity. And so let's say 2 words about our brain and what brain plasticity is in order to understand this concept. So you know that our brain is quite small compared to the rest of our body. It's just 2% in terms of volume, in terms of weight, respect to our body. But as you know, it consumed 20% of the energy we need. And what consumes the energy inside the brain? Most of the energy is consumed by synaptic plasticity. Here you can see a neuron that is composed by a soma, by the nucleus. Then we have on the left the dendrites, and on the right the axon. The dendrites where the neurons receive the information, while on the right we have the axon, that is the way that to which it transmits the information. The signal goes along through the axon and go to the other neurons. This is the way that it communicates to the other neurons, and in particular through the synapse. The neurotransmitters are released inside the synaptic cleft from the presynaptic neurons, and they are received. They bind with the receptor on the postsynaptic neurons that receive this the neurotransmitter and pass on the signal to the nucleus, and then that gives rise to a biological cascade, and it goes on to communicate to other neurons. But synaptic plasticity basically is the capability of neurons to react to what happened in the environment, to the creation, the capability of neuron to create new synapses and to lose old synapses. This is the base of learning. When we are learning, when, for example, if you right now you're listening, you're focused, your brain is creating, your neurons basically in your hippocampus right now, they are creating new synapses. The synapses are increasing, and then they create the new synapse. So this is a process that is fundamental for intelligence and for memory, for learning and for memory. But there is another process, very important, other than plasticity, that is the neurogenesis. That means the capability to create new neurons. Since a few decades ago, scientists believed that we born with a certain amount of neurons, and we pass all our life just with this amount of neurons, while actually they discover in recent times that we produce new neurons, we develop new neurons also during our adulthood, during our adult life. Not everywhere, actually, but mainly in the dental gyrus of the hippocampus. So always in the hippocampus we are. So this is the locus of the memory, the creation of new memory. And this is really important because the neurogenesis, the adult neurogenesis, it's involved in memory encoding and also in mood regulation, and is the phenomenon that prevents cognitive decline associated with aging and also associated with stress. So how all this is related with food? So actually, food can influence neuronal plasticity and neurogenesis. Not only food, also learning and physical activity. You have to think that cognition, memory, learning, as well as motricity developed during evolution as tools to enhance the possibility and the capabilities to find nutrients, and thus ensure the life of cells, of animals, and of humans, of course. So this process, you have to imagine, they're all intrinsically bounded, and they can influence each other acting on the same neuronal circuits, because they develop basically for the same reason. So how we can influence neuronal plasticity and neurogenesis through our diet? We can influence our brain through caloric restriction, polyunsaturated fatty acid, and polyphenols. These are the three main elements that can have strong impact on our brain. Caloric restriction. So as we said before, we live in a obesogenic environment. We eat too much. And yes, it's not only a question of quantity, but definitely is also a question of quantity. We eat too much. If you see in the picture, you have two subjects, two monkeys. The first one, the subject in the picture A, is an animal kept in ab libitum diet, an animal that had the possibility to eat as much as he wants. While on the right side, we have an animal kept in caloric restriction. So was given much less food, 30% less food compared to the first animal. Look at the picture B and D. Also in AEC, you can see the difference in aging. This is exactly two subjects with exactly the same age, but one was ab libitum, while the other was kept in caloric restriction. You can really see the difference in terms of aging. Look how the right one looks younger. And it's not only a matter of aspect, but also a matter of cognitive capability. Indeed, caloric restriction increases ghrelin, the peptide hormones that is involved in the appetite stimuli. And ghrelin stimulates BDNF expression. BDNF is the brain-derived neurotrophic factor that is directly involved in neurogenesis. So that ghrelin directly acts on hippocampal neurons and induce formation of new synapses in CA1 region, that is corno di Ammone 1, is a region of the hippocampus. So why this? One possible explanation is that when we were hunter-gatherers and we spent days without eating, with the ghrelin, when we do not eat, the ghrelin start to rise, the level of ghrelin start to rise in our blood, and the ghrelin start to stimulate the expression of BDNF. Probably this due to the time of when we were hunter-gatherers, because what happened with the stimulation of BDF, that we create new synapses and new neurons in a region of the hippocampus that is responsible for spatial learning. So it's a matter of increased alertness when the ghrelin level arise. So we increase the alertness and our memory, our spatial memory. So we are more able to memorize the different places where we can find foods. When we have polyunsaturated fatty acids, that is that we can find in fish oil, or in nuts. They are antioxidant. All of you probably know the polyunsaturated fatty acid, or should know. They are one of the major constituents of synaptic membrane, because the synaptic membrane is made of fat, and particularly by polyunsaturated fatty acid. And they have a structural function, but they also stimulate BDNF expression as well as ghrelin. So they stimulate the production of new neurons. And then we have polyphenols. Polyphenols that are antioxidant. So they help the transmission of oxidants and nutrients to neurons, and their action promote the dendritic growth and the expression of BDNF. So polyphenols, polyunsaturated fatty acid, caloric restriction. All these elements of the diet can really influence our brain plasticity. That means our intelligence, our capability to create new memories, our capability to learn new things. So acting on our diet, we can really influence our cognitive capabilities. So we are what we eat. This quote by Feuerbach: "Der Mensch ist, was ist." So we are what we eat in English, or l'uomo ciò che mangia in Italian. This is actually true. What we eat deeply influence our mood and our cognitive capabilities. It is also true what Brillat-Savarin said. So only wise men know the art of eating, and what we say before, that is, wise men not only know the art of eating, but probably they are wise because they eat well. They know what to eat. But there is something else also. Who is missing? There is another key factor that influences our cognitive capability, and is related to what we eat in every day. This missing element are gut bacteria. Gut bacteria are really fundamental. There is a strong and bidirectional communication between our gut and our brain through what is called the gut-brain axis. So between the central and the enteric nervous system. It's bidirectional because not only our gut influences our brain, but our brain can influence the population of our gut bacteria. For example, anxiety is detrimental for our gut bacteria. And vice versa, acting on our gut bacteria, we can we can act on mood. For example, in the last years, a new discipline born that is called nutritional psychiatry. That means that acting on the diet, they influence gut bacteria in order to help people suffering from depression or other mood or mental disorder. So we saw how we can act actually on our diet in order to influence our body, starting from the quote of Brillat-Savarin and arriving to the quote of Feuerbach. So we need to pay a lot of attention to what we eat, not just because of in general term of health, but also because it directly influence our brain and our cognitive capabilities. So, and I finish here, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you very much, Riccardo. It was very, very interesting, and it's better. We have here with us Luisa Torri, who is the director of the thesis of Riccardo. And then I think that it's better if I give the floor to Luisa for a first question. Then the question of all students that are here. Luisa, to you.
Thank you, Antonella. And thank you so much, Riccardo, for your excellent presentation. It was super interesting. I think you provide a lot of inputs to our students to think about our food behavior. Just a simple question, or maybe it's not so simple, but I would like to ask your opinion about how it's possible to translate this theory in practice with consumers. So I'm not sure that there are some consumers campaigns to inform consumers about the effect of food on our brain plasticity, on our memory, or on our cognitive abilities in general. And I would like to ask you if you know if there are some consumers campaigns promoted by the European Union, for example, and if you think that they are effective or not to get a good impact on consumers' behavior, and if you think that there are maybe other more effective solutions that we can suggest.
Hello, Luisa. Thank you for the question. This is not simple at all. Actually, it's a huge question. And yeah, first of all, there are a lot of campaigns promoted also by the European Union about brain health and how food can help the brain health. Indeed, food actually is the most important tool, the most important resources that we have in order to prevent neurodegeneration. Also, in order to prevent or to mild the effect of Alzheimer's disease. So food is really, really, really important. There are campaigns, but of course, as all the informational campaign, they are not very effective, as it is, for example, the campaign for smoke or for the eating healthy campaign, the other non-communicable disease. It's not only a matter of information, it's a matter of acting of the environment we live in. In terms of food, in terms of eating, there are many things we can do. As Luisa knows, I'm actually working on this kind of non-verbal communication and non-verbal tools that we can define as nudge, in order to prevent certain kind of behavior, in this case of food behavior. For example, we can act concerning the fact that we eat too much food. A fundamental aspect is visual perception and the portion size effect. Reducing the quantity of the single portion can reduce the total amount of food, of the food we eat. So there are many simple tricks, let's say, that we can use to help people in everyday life without asking them cognitive efforts or asking them to always remember that food is important for our brain and for our life and for our general health. Not only only our health, but the health of also of the planet. So the big problem is that every day we are, all of us are very busy. We have so many things to do, and we have few attention and few cognitive resources to spend to inhibit a certain kind of behavior. So we have to develop and simple tricks and to act on the environment in order to prevent detrimental behaviors that people can adopt. It was a huge question, so I tried to keep this short.
I know. Thank you so much, Riccardo, for trying to summarize your opinion on this. I know it was a very large, huge question. I don't know if there are some questions from students. Do you have any questions? Chiara has a question. If children don't learn to practice sports and eat well during their childhood, after that, when they will be elder and they would like to change their habits, will it be very difficult for them due to the fact that habits learned when they were children, generally they are maintained?
Of course, it's difficult, but it's indeed possible because of what we said before because of neuronal plasticity. The fact that our brain is plastic, that the fact that our brain can reshape or totally reshapes itself, that neuronal connections can be modified, is the reason why they can change habits. It's indeed difficult because it's related to the reward system, with the limbic system. So there are many aspects that you have to change. You have to change some mental mechanism that your brain does. So you have to change brain circuits, but this is possible thanks to synaptic plasticity and neuronal plasticity, thanks to the fact that our brain generate new neurons, and these neurons are capable to adapt and as a consequence to the environment and to our behavior.
I would like to add one small question. Okay, there is a question from Khalid. You said that food can be consumed exclusively for its rewarding experience. How much of this is physiological and how much is psychological? For instance, some people can feel guilt and shame after eating a box of chocolates.
Yeah, after, not before. That's the problem. It's the reward system is very much physiological. It's a physiological system, but of course, there is not a sharp distinction between physiological or psychological. They are both interconnected. We cannot draw a line and separate the two things about what is mind, what is a brain, what is physiological, what is psychological. They are deeply interconnected. We are talking about the same thing, basically. And the reward system is made of three different steps. Wanting, that is dominated by dopamine. Then we have liking, this is dominated by opioids. And then we have learning. So these two systems, wanting, learning, liking, learning, that are the system that they are the steps that that give rise to the wanting system. So while wanting is the initial phase, then in order to obtain the liking, so the pleasure, liking, learning occur throughout all the process. So let's say that the learning is the more psychological part. So we learn that eating that food gave us pleasure, and we were not able to inhibit the consumption of this food, and so we feel guilt. So the fact that we feel guilt is related with the fact that we were not able to inhibit. So this link to not with the reward system, but with the cognitive top-down processes. We saw before that food intake is dominated by three processes: homeostasis, the reward system, and the top-down processes. So when we are not able to say, okay, I do not have to eat, we are not able to inhibit a food consumption, for example, of chocolate, we are making, let's say, a mistake in the top-down process. That is more the cognitive part of the system that control food intake. I don't know if I answer. Okay.
A question from Eva. Hi, I had a question about the reward system in the brain to keep eating and keep us from knowing our borders with food. Is this something all animals have, also herbivores? And how far does this go? Is this also with unicellular organisms? Oh, it's quite articulated.
Oh. I don't. Okay, all animals have the reward system. Think about the Pavlov experiment with the dog. It acts actually on the reward system and the associative learning. So the dog learn because he feel a reward, he feel a pleasure related with food consumption. About unicellular organism, I don't think so. But by the way, the first and main act of all living system is looking for food, to find food and eat food in order to carry on all the cellular processes. And this is the base why we move. The motricity and it is the first step the evolution obtained in order to get closer to food. And thinking is an evolutionary consequence of motricity, because we start to think in order to memorize the place where food is and the motion we have to do in order to find food. So that's how I said before, everything is connected. Keep us from knowing our borders with food. It's difficult to say how we can define borders, because we know there are many people suffering from food disorders. Food disorders is exactly a case when we cannot find a border. We cannot inhibit food intake. And this is related with the reward system. It is the same the thing that happened in the case of addiction.
A question from Chiara. I'm reflecting on the first lockdown in Italy. Several people live alone and with no possibilities to have lunch or dinner with friends or relatives. Did they start to eat more? Is it possible?
Actually, we eat more when we eat with other people. Most of the experiments show that when we are in a social situation, we eat more. And it changes also the speed of how we eat. If the person in front of us eat really fast, we eat fast too, or the contrary. So I don't know. For me, I think most of the people ate more during the lockdown, the first lockdown, because you maybe you always have the possibility to find food in your house. Your fridge is always full. Your kitchen is full of food, all kind of food. So you're not outside, so the food is always reachable, and you are in a situation with a high stress. So you are really stressed. You are feeling the lockdown. You are feeling all the COVID situation. So you are emotionally impaired. We still are emotionally impaired, and so we can compensate eating more food. But it's not a matter of eating alone, but more it's a thing to be emotionally unstable, to feel the anxiety, and so we eat more, and to have the food always available.
Excuse me, Riccardo, add something about this COVID-related question?
Sorry?
Yeah, so as a university, we did a research using an online survey to investigate the food habits of the Italian population during the first lockdown. And we noticed that more than half of the respondents increased their liking for food, and they eaten more than the period before the lockdown. So I would just to add here in the chat a link to the very simple publication that we produced. This is just at an information level, very simple level. It's not a scientific publication. We are working to write a couple of papers that will be published in international journal with the results of this study. But if you like, I'm sorry, it's in Italian only, but if you like, you can start reading this publication to have an idea on how the food consumption habits changed during the first lockdown.
Thank you, Luisa.
Any other question? Okay, I have one more question for you, Riccardo. When you said wanting and learning and liking, another word comes up in my mind, which is desire. And when student asked about reward, I linked desire with reward. I was thinking to the food craving phenomenon. And would you like to say something about food craving? Do you think it can impact a lot our food consumption? This intense desire to eat something in a specific moment can be really controlled from some people or less from other people. There is a connection to the effect on the brain activity or not? It's something that can be related to the brain plasticity, or food craving is just a few moments, maybe in a day, in a week, in a month, for people that doesn't have any effect on brain plasticity.
If it has an effect of, especially on brain plasticity, I don't remember.
There are individual differences in the attitude towards food craving among subjects. Can be an effect also on brain plasticity or not. So if food craving is very intense in a person, that could be so strong to have an effect on brain plasticity, on memory, or it's just one of the affecting.
Of course, craving is a result of brain detrimental plasticity. I mean, whichever kind of behavior is the result of brain plasticity. They can be detrimental or positive or functional plasticity. But for example, depression is the result and is caused by a loss of brain plasticity and a loss in neurogenesis. For example, the people that are treated for cancer, they took some medicine that inhibit adult neurogenesis, and they suffer from depression. So neurogenesis, adult neurogenesis, and depression are directly related. There is a strong correlation between these two factors. And so that means that everything involved plasticity. And of course, craving is a result of a problem in the reward system. That is also what happened during addiction, that you want, is the wanting system. You want something more and more, but you like it less and less, because there is a resistance to the opioids in the blood-brain barrier. So we do not perceive the opioids as we perceived before. So we enjoy less what we are taking as a drug or as our food, but we desire it more because we are never satisfied. That is the basis of craving.
Thank you so much. So that's terrible.
Yes, but I mean, plasticity is good because we can reverse it.
That's the nice part.
Yeah, fortunately.
More questions? Virginia, I wanted to know how you started to study neuroscience in terms of preparation. Did you go to medical school and did all the years required? I would really like to know because I'm very interested.
No, I didn't, even if my degree in neuroscience is under the Faculty of Medicine. I do not have a medical preparation. There was a test at the beginning to be admitted in the course, in the degree. I passed the test, so I was allowed to take all the degree. It was just a matter of course, of CFU or CFU in terms of credits. You need some credits in chemistry, in biology, and in psychology or other disciplines. But I was lucky enough, thanks to the multidisciplinarity of Pollenzo, to have all the credits required and to be admitted after the test, of course. So I know that now the curricula changed a bit compared to what I did in the 10 years ago. You should check, at least in Milan, but it can depend a lot.
It seems that there are not more questions.
Yes, and I think that other question can be addressed to Riccardo.
Of
There
course.
is his email in our website. Then all questions can continue so long. But now I think that we can close this conference. Thank you very much, Riccardo. Thank you, Luisa and Paolo, and see you on Wednesday for the last conference of December. And
yes, this is the last conference before the festivity, Wednesday at 6 p.m. with Dauro Mattia Zocchi, not Maria, sorry, and is a colleague of Riccardo, and it's very interesting. It's another important conference, and I hope to see all these students. And thank you to new student Luisa Torri. You are a young student, very good. And then yes, and thank you, Riccardo. It's very interesting. Fascinating your interesting relationship between neurosciences and food, multidisciplinary
Thank you very much.
approach. Thank you.
I don't like at all the online conference. Unfortunately, I'm not really good to speak in online with online device. I would really prefer to be in university, and I wish we will be able to be there for the next conferences next year, at least for some of them, and to enjoy Pollenzo all together.
Yes, I invite you for another conference, okay? Bye bye. Good evening to all.
Bye bye. Good evening.
Good evening to
Thank
students.
you. Bye.
Have a nice evening.
Ciao ciao. Ciao Luisa.
Bye.
Ciao Antonella. Ciao Riccardo. Ciao a tutti.